Thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear Ariana, for first of all for inviting and organizing this incredible event. Good morning, everybody. It's my honor to be here with you today and to address my keynote speech on quality and relevance of higher education. I'm really happy to have been able to socialize with you, and yesterday also having learning from you on how you join your efforts to promote quality and relevance of higher education, and plus to create an environment that is conducive to learning. But to start my speech, I would like to also mention this is 5th of October, and it's International Day of Teachers. So we're all educationalists, we're all teachers in some way. So congratulations, everybody. And let's take this profession actually back to what it actually deserves to be, recognized, relevant, and contributing to the societal needs. So congratulations to everybody. Thank you very much. Well, to start with my presentation, and I was told that, to start with my presentation, let's just be honest for one part, for 1 second. At this point of time, and it's really very important for all of us, how many of you are sitting here with a worry deep in your heart that there are so many things going on globally? The wars, the calamities, just to name but a few. Well, if you look at the, basically as per UNESCO data, around 56 countries are currently in political and military tensions. This is the recent report, 2022. Well, let's compare it to the World War II. And they were in the maximum number of countries that were engaged in World War II were 30. So we are certainly in a period of huge changes and drastic changes. And putting my hand on my heart, I really feel bad for those that are currently being killed on the borders defending their countries. So it's really a hard moment for all of us. It affects not only the country, the 56 countries, it affects everybody. So moving forward, well, let's look at what is going on at democracy level. Democracy and its premises are shaken everywhere in the globe. There is no country at this point that could definitely say, well, that democracy is actually working its wonders in our country. It doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. If you look at the Transparency International, there is no country with limited or low level of corruption. So they're all really in a huge trouble. Well, we see a whole increasing prevalence of authoritarian systems with deeply rooted corruption everywhere. Then we have nature calamities. We have, look at the human interactions. I mean, if you enter into the social media, you really feel so sorry. Where have we ended up with? Where are we now? How people are interacting with each other. The simple human interaction is becoming, again, in the larger sense, it's becoming really very problematic. And then we have constant lies everywhere, falsifications of historical facts everywhere. It's prevalent. So would you say that this is a coincidence? Or would you say that, it's just explosion of something, like, already there is no way that we can deteriorate because we have come to the point that it's already time for us to get together and think, okay, so what are we doing now? And could we, as educationalists, be some sort of at the core of some of the problem? Have we erred at some point? We all know that education is a long-term impact thing. So the generations, whatever we are suffering, our generations are suffering now are the results of the actions that were taken in education decades ago. So could it be that that is actually the problem? And this is where we are standing, unfortunately, having to deal with all of those issues that are there. Yes, if we look carefully of what we are teaching now, and it's really very relevant at this point to start talking about quality and relevance of program from all of this, because this is the life we want to change, this is the life we want to live, and what are we doing to make this life really productive one? So when we look at what we are teaching currently, it's predominance of theoretical teaching, less so application, disconnection from the real life, and a deepening and progressive drift away from the core values of higher education, which are so crucial for sustainable success, academic, social, ecological, and humanistic matters. So let's we talk about core values, and I would like to concentrate on the core values of higher education, where we are with it, how we are working around it, and how we're implementing it. What is education without core values? So education without core values, as per Lewis, is as useful as it is, but it is useful, of course, nobody can deny it, but seems rather make a man a more clever devil out of it. So we have to have these values, we have to abide by those values, we have to define those values and live by those values to make the education towards implementing those values, putting them into place and benefiting the societies. So let's look further, like a brief exploration of the values, higher education values. I have just looked through, so what is the core values of higher education? And a very brief glimpse demonstrates that, well, there is Magna Carta, which basically is signed by, has become a global document, although it started in Europe, but then it expanded globally, and it's now a global tool. And there are 4 key core values there: autonomy, academic freedom, a space of toleration, and protection by governments. Of course, a Magna Carta is, it's supported by the higher education community at large, but when you look deeper into it, the terminology is as important as it is, but you will find that there is identification of it, but the clear definitions are yet lacking. So how do we measure it if we do not have definition? How do we put it into practice? This is the next step to think about. Well, let's move to the European higher education area. In 2018, Paris Communiqué lists 4 fundamental values in Europe: institutional autonomy, academic freedom and integrity, participation of students and staff in higher education governance, and public responsibility for and of higher education. So in 2020, the Rome Communiqué defines only academic freedom. In 2018, they just identified those values. In 2020, they defined only academic freedom, and the plan is to define all the other values by 2024 in Tirana Communiqué. So, well, it seems like, yeah, we're coming there, but how is higher education impacted by those values? Are we just talking terms, definitions, or are we actually getting into the business? Well, let's look at higher education values in UNESCO, what UNESCO promotes. There is no specific value for higher education, and there is no specific definition for core values as for higher education identified by UNESCO. And this is just an extract from the Futures of Education 2021, which is a UNESCO publication, but they do highlight respect, empathy, equality, and solidarity. And also human rights and peace are the core values of education that we need to abide by. But again, these are at the declaration level. To define it and to put it into practice, we need to take further steps for that. Then another study, well, I also looked at the scholars at risk, and the scholars at risk actually did some summary of all different values that were highlighted in the human rights law, UNESCO instruments, and civil society statements, and it's equitable access, accountability, institutional autonomy, academic freedom, and social responsibility. But these are just not the terms. So how do we make this into practice? And yesterday, all of you were talking about autonomy of higher education as the core that is highlighted in your constitutions, in all your documents. But how do we make sure that this autonomy, this academic freedom, all these values are respected and put into practice? Well, I did the further study, and well, let's see why it is important. Is there a correlation between higher education values and success in performance, therefore impact on society? Yes, there is, and it is a very strong one. And you would see basically it influencing in all aspects of the life, and whatever we are, wherever we are now, is actually the result of how we, as higher education community, were actually treating those values decades ago. Well, just put the hand on your heart and say, well, have we been abiding by them? Do we have any mechanisms to make those values work, to make those values, to integrate those values into our curricula, to make them work for our societies? And the further study demonstrates that we have a real issue at the implementation level. We are very good at identifying in the first place, and you see that the documents are identifying it. But when it comes to defining and putting into practice, we are already lagging there. Well, this is just a study demonstrating a correlation, strong correlation between higher education values and success in performance of higher education institutions, both in Western and Western Europe and in North America systems. Now let's see how we respect those values. Well, I briefly searched on University World News, and you would see basically ample of incidences of infringing the core values of higher education globally. And namely, just you search only for academic freedom, and you will end up with 2,194 articles since 2007, mentioning how the academic freedom is infringed at all levels, in all parts of the globe. It's not specific to developing systems, to democratic systems. It's everywhere in the democracies, developed democracies, and in the developing countries. It's prevalent everywhere. So how do we deal with that? Because if we don't have this core value, if we do not have this academic freedom, how do we make sure that the knowledge we are producing is actually serving, is an accurate one and actually serving the needs of the society? Well, I'm not talking even about the Google search, which brings about like trillions of results on how the academic freedom is infringed. Well, now let's go further into the issue. This is the part on how we put the core values into the higher education and how we make it influence the society. Well, I would like to bring you a brief study we did for UNESCO for the World Higher Education Conference, where we looked at the quality and relevance of the program. Just a brief abstract out of it and the findings, brief findings of what came. What is it that, how our programs, how we as a higher education community work together to make sure that our programs we deliver are of high quality and are relevant to the societal needs. And basically, the study was like done well, it took about 1 year to do this study, and we looked at globally at all parts of all regions in the globe, covering it fully. Well, 11th century university, high-level educational institution in which students study for degrees and academic research is done. So, well, we see the paradigmatic shift already throughout the centuries. In the 20th century, we already see the multiversities appearing. And then in the 21st century, it's already metaversities that are prevailing there. And how do we deal with this diversity? And just an example of a metaversity that is there is the program that NCR is proposing in Abu Dhabi, and this has become a center of attention of a lot of academic environments to see how they are working, how the metaversity is influencing the education paradigm shift. And all of this, they're all, it's not that we're moving from one stage or one phase to another. It's a coexistence. This is the diversification. We're at the core of diversification. We're having all of them coexist at the same time in a fundamentally altered, impossible to predict, and rapidly changing landscape. So this is where we are at the institutional level. So how we are, as universities, try to reinstate our values and try to reinstate our value for the society, to make us relevant for the needs. And these are the themes that I'm making a reference to at the UNESCO World Higher Education Conference. And I was responsible for the quality and relevance of programs. And I don't know why this is not working anymore. Yeah, okay, now it works. Quality and relevance of programs. And my dearest colleague, Dr. Salmi, he was responsible for the inclusion in higher education, and he will delve deeper into the theme here. So, I would like to share with you the brief findings I had from this study in terms of the program, curriculum, relevance, and the disruption and diversification and differentiation that the whole higher education paradigm is going through. So basically there is a huge shift in the learning, and well, it turns out that we are not responsive to that shift, because as higher education institutions, we are still pretty much conventional. Well, let's, as Ariana mentioned, my background is in history, and I always like to see the historical developments, everything in how it evolves to be able to judge on, find the truth in it. I don't know, it's not moving. Okay, so, we had we have had 3 tech revolutions in education throughout the whole history of education. The first one was the 10th century, when the alphabet was introduced into the learning process. The second one was the mass production of books in 16th century. Then the education already was delivered through the books. And the third the era of disruption we entered is this ICT revolution we're currently in. So if you look at how it evolved, the currency of education was information at the earliest stages. So the people would pay to get the information, because this was the only source to get information. And now, with the ICT expansion and the information era, the currency of education can no longer be information. Nobody will pay and come to the university to get information, because information is everywhere. So, and we as higher education institutions, we still continue delivering that information. And then we say, okay, so why are we not relevant? Why they don't come to us? Why there is unemployment there? Our graduates find it difficult to get into the labor market. What they want now from us is problem-solving skills, basic skills development, wisdom, and insight on how to work with this information rather than how to get the information. So this is a huge paradigmatic shift, and our methodologies, teaching learning methodologies and assessment methodologies, they're not yet there to support this need. So there is a study done by Harvard professor, and basically what he found through his study that students nowadays learn 50% less from the higher education curriculum than they did 50 years ago. So it's already devaluation of the education programs. And another study done by the, I know that some of the universities in Latin America, they are engaged with the CLA+, the Collegiate Learning Assessment of the learning outcomes that is done by CAE and OECD. So basically what they do is evaluating the student at the, in terms of the generic skills and competencies at the entry level, and then at the graduation level, and then comparison of the value added of the program. And they found very insignificant growth in those skills in the students who entered and graduated. So this already says a lot about the irrelevance of what we're doing. What we have, let's look at the we saw the diversification of the institutional settings, but we also have diversification at the program level. Basically what we have is the classical bachelor, master, and doctoral. So if a student gets into higher education, and if a student stays there like 4 + 2 + 4, 10 years, without any, 10 years, basically I call it 10 years of isolation from the real life. The student gets out of the program after 10 years, not employed, and the best thing he can do is stay at the university and teach. So this person who has been isolated from the whole world and stays in education to teach the new generation. This is what we're doing. And we basically, why? Because, well, this is the formal education, and all of us at this point, we all acknowledge that the instruments we have for recognition of qualifications is just only for the formal education. But let's look what's going on in the informal area. But before that, I would like to mention that it's not that bad all, because now we see in the formal education short programs also appearing. Like if you look at the Dutch system, they have pre-master level programs, and many other systems have like this pre-master, post-master, shorter programs, also enabling the students to change their major. If, for example, they found that, well, after bachelor's degree, I find, oh, this is not what I want to do, and then they enable changing the majors through the pre-master courses also. So there are shorter courses that are popping up there, making it more relevant, the formal education. But as Ariane also mentioned, it's not only the formal education. Higher education no longer restricted to higher education institutions. It already has expanded beyond. And now we see emergence of the alternative. I mean, the alternative education has been there for a long time, but it is becoming more and more active and more important. So what we have here is already alternative education, non-formal and informal education that is already higher education too. Now we have to accept, all of us, that higher education, when we say higher education, it's not only higher education institutions. There are so many other opportunities. We just need to make sure that we come up with the policy and regulatory frameworks which allow recognition of those smaller qualifications and which allow allow more flexibility in the learning of our students and help us also to resolve a lot of problems. It's not news that, well, with like those small provisions are really very useful for the people of determination, for the dropout rates, and all of them. So there is a huge potential in those alternative provisions to make sure that the access to higher education is widened. Now, I further looked at the as per the data. Well, we looked, so what is the problem? Why do we have this issue with, why our programs are not relevant, and what is the issue with the quality of the programs? In the first place, the problem is curriculum itself. Look what we do with the curriculum. It's all time-based. Well, it's convenient for us to have it time-based, but it's not convenient for the student. If we talk about student-centered approach, we need to move to competency-based and diversify the curricula that we have. I'm not saying fully move, reject one and move to another, but diversify the curriculum to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the students. Look at the teaching, learning, and assessment methodologies. Of course, during a bright example, the COVID. Overnight, all the universities announced that, well, we successfully moved from traditional education face-to-face to online. Well, moving on to Zoom platform is not an online education, let's acknowledge. There are so many nitty-gritties out there for online education, which majority of the universities are not putting in place yet. So then we had, another problem with the curriculum is the lack of exposure to the real life. Majority of the students in my study said, well, I went out and I didn't know what to do. Students from Latin Americans, they said that, well, for me, the key tool was the language. I learned the language and I had privilege over other students. So in different parts of the different students coming from different, parts of the globe, they had their own issues, but they all said that we are detached from the real life. So the curriculum itself is a problem. The next problem is the faculty. When I had the meetings with the faculty, even the faculty themselves said that we are no longer relevant. From Africa, there was a huge call that from the faculty members, they said, well, we're just immersed into the higher education without any preparation to talk to the, to work with the students. So the faculty is also another problem. They don't have opportunity for industry exposure. The regulatory requirements also prevent industry engagement. So there is a lot of issue with the faculty, professionalization of the faculty, upskilling, reskilling the faculty. And you also mentioned that too yesterday in your presentations. Regulators are another issue related to the irrelevance, contributing to the irrelevance and under-quality programs. Well, if you look at the regulatory frameworks of many countries, you would not see a clear definition for what is the higher education, what is the expectation from higher education. If you don't know what to expect, how can you deliver? Teaching and learning is not priority on the government agenda, so all they're interested in is just having the admissions and the graduations, and then they look at the employment rate, and then, okay, so what's wrong? The universities are to blame. They're not doing a good job. Regulations prevent industry meaningful engagement, and of course, regulations infringe academic freedom and autonomy. We all agree on that. Well, another issue is the higher education institutions. The stakeholders in my focus groups, they all univocally said, well, higher education institutions are not investing enough in revision of their programs, updating and upgrading their programs. Well, we have, even from the North America, they said, well, we have a couple of meetings with with the labor market representatives, we have a couple of chats, and it ends up there. There should be a meaningful engagement to make the relevance, to improve the relevance, and also investment, joint efforts and investment of the university into the revision of the programs to update them. Another issue is industry and professional associations, and we all agree that in this region, and the focus group from this region also voiced out the issues with the professional association, that they're not interested in actually in higher education. Well, I also met with professional associations. They said, well, we don't trust higher education, and higher education says we don't trust professional associations. So they don't trust each other, and they put the blame on each other. But professional associations themselves, apart from the US and a couple of countries in Europe, they're not active. I would say that they are more concerned about the professionals rather than the profession. That is why we end up having trouble. So what is the need in the market? So how do we know the needs? And also, well, currently, you would see that many countries are revising their higher education or education policies, introducing new reforms, and so on and so forth. And every time a new reform comes, this reform is just developed, introduced to close the gaps. So they are just patching the system here and there without coming up with a holistic approach. And this makes the system suffer. So if I'm introducing, for example, in Europe, a separate introduction of European credit and transfer system, it ruined all the systems that were really engaged in the former Soviet countries because it was not done holistically as a whole package to introduce the changes. We are just making here and there patches here and there and then expect that it will work, but we end up developing systems that are more or less like the Frankenstein monster effect. So this is what we are developing in our systems. And that was raised not only by the developing systems, the concern also came from such developed countries as Australia and others in my study. So this is a problem in many countries. So to make it work, we have to make it coherent. We have to have different parts of reforms talk to each other, contribute and supplement each other. So otherwise, it's going to be a failure. So within a bigger frame, we would see that you would see that in many systems now, although the regulatory environments, they are still making higher education, limited to some groups and not the others, but higher education is no longer limited to age groups, time, higher education institutions, single modality, non-formal education. So it's already beyond that. We need to look, for example, if I am 70 years old and I want to do a bachelor, I should not be said, well, you are beyond the age, you can't do the bachelor degree. There should be no age restriction for education. Time should not be actually setting the boundaries for education. Like, look at the picture. So we have time-based learning and competency-based learning. So it's basically the debate between efficiency versus effectiveness. Yes, when we do the time-based curriculum, we can teach like thousands of students in 1 year, and in 4-year program we can graduate like massively. But look at, is it effective? Is it effective? Does it meet the individual needs of the students? So how about competency-based learning, which is effective? So we have to decide what do we want to do and move in that direction. Well, you would say basically, what the hell quality assurance does then? And I am here, representative of quality assurance, and I led the global network for quality assurance for 2 terms. And now the question to me, what the hell are you doing? Right? So that's very reasonable question, and let's see how many. Well, we have lots of standards there, you will see. Basically, we have the global level standards, umbrella level framework. We have individual regional level evaluation of regional standards, subject-specific standards. Then we have national level standards. Professional associations come with their own standards. We have all this diversity of standards, and also there are universities who also come up with their own standards. And well, you would say, well, with this many standards, well, you are talking to us about academic freedom, autonomy, you are setting all these standards. But standards are not that bad. It's the way you define and implement them that make it bad. Because end of the day, well, the globe is diverse. Just take the language. Well, I mean, we need one language to understand each other. So, and the standards are the language to understand each other. The standards are the language to link us, to make sure that basically we recognize whatever is done in other system, and this is transferable to our system as well. And it also refers to qualifications. But the way we develop the standards, the way we implement the standards, this is the problem. This is where we have issues with the academic integrity and that touching and ruining the core values of education. So, but again, as with many other things, I like this quote very much. There is a surprising amount of prejudice against quality control. Well, of course, everybody says, but the proof of the pudding is still in the eating. And I fully agree with that. I mean, you still have to eat to see whether this is relevant or of high quality. So what we are doing now, well, I did a recent, I looked at the standards also globally, what is happening, and let's see how we are putting those standards, what we as quality assurance, how we put those standards into play. And this is where the problems come. The recent findings, we talk more while we do less. There is a lot of definition, that identification, definition, a lot of writing over there, but when it comes to putting into practice, this is where we are making a huge mistake. And there was a recent study done by Central European University, and they basically looked at the European, in Europe only, these findings come from Europe. They looked at about 17 countries in Europe, and they analyzed their standards one by one, plus regulatory frameworks of those countries. And you also yesterday mentioned, made a lot of reference to your own constitutions about the core values, the autonomy and academic freedom, and how this is put into, how this is really very important for you. So they looked at how, these researchers looked at how quality assurance was actually putting in place the fundamental values of higher education. And the fundamental values are, among of them, well, I already introduced academic freedom, autonomy, how quality assurance does it. So the first question, they basically looked at 3 questions. The first question was, are fundamental values included in the agency level regulatory provisions for quality assurance? So yes, the short answer, yes. In many of them, they make a reference to autonomy, to academic freedom, to fundamental values of higher education. Then we look further. I will look further, and the next thing is that, yes, if it is identified already at regulatory framework in your constitutions, as you mentioned, we want to look at the step deeper and see whether the fundamental values are defined. So they are identified, yes, but whether they are defined, they have clear definition of what we mean by those terminologies. Of course, we are just in quality assurance, we have this jargon, our jargon, like we use so many terms, but when it comes to definition, we have to be really clear. And then it turns out that none had it there. So the core values that were identified in the regulatory frameworks, in the standards, they were identified, but the standards failed to define them. So when it comes to me, how do I measure something which is not defined? This is already a problem. Then the third question was, well, are there concrete quality assurance measures to support respect for fundamental values? So if there is no definition, but is there a measurement tool to make sure that those values are respected? And none was there. So if we talk a lot about the values, and then we see at how this is put into practice, how it is measured, we're not even measuring it, we're not even putting it into practice, we're just defining it. It's at the rhetoric level only. And this is where we're having the key problems actually of influencing the society. How do we influence the society if we can't influence ourselves and put it into practice, put it into implementation? Well, what Inkwahi did, we had our own study, and here I will have to do a lot of clicks before it all comes, and I'm sorry, it's a bit late. It's delayed reaction. But, well, I think Wahi we looked at, we collected all the core values, and we looked at we did the analysis of a system, looking at, or many systems were in the same. This is the average from our local analysis. And we would see that at, well, I'm sorry, it's not coming. Yeah, these are all the core values that were identified in the UNESCO, OECD, INCWAHE, and other international and regional organizational guidelines. And then we put it into a matrix and started to evaluate the alignment of the current standards in many countries. We tried to understand whether they are respecting these core values, which are really very important. And basically we found that, we still have a lot of issues there to resolve. Again, when we look deeper, and I know that in many of your countries you are currently piloting the diverse measurement methods, and well, look at this table, and you would see that this is a framework of all possible external evaluation tools, like evaluating institution, macro credentials, which are the programs, micro credentials, students, quality assurance agencies. These are the evaluation units that we have. And these are at the end, we are evaluating at the entry point, we are doing monitoring, accountability, professional certification. So these are all possible evaluation things. Well, it turns out that out of all the standards, whatever we are evaluating when it comes to relevance and quality is just the peripheries. We're not evaluating the core, the learning outcomes. So, well, true, there are a lot of pilots over here and there, but at the national level, I don't know of any country who would be doing the evaluation of the learning outcomes apart from Finland, who is currently piloting the whole system. All 14 higher universities in Finland are currently under pilot to evaluate the value added of the program. What we need to understand is not whether well, at one of our discussions with accreditors, when American accreditors, and I'm not naming them, when they said that, well, when we go to the university, we want to understand what the student learns. And my point was, okay, this is time to move from what student learns to how student learns. And for me, a basic question to all of you now, has any of you tried to understand or did a brief study of how your students actually learn? Well, this is where the core is. We need to understand how they learn to help them learn, to make them learners. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So basically, the key findings from quality assurance that globally, you would see that, well, we still have issues with the recognition of qualifications. Quality assurance is not active at that level. Recognition of research and development, recognition of quality assurance itself. So there are a lot of issues that we still need to tackle in terms of quality assurance, a lot of gaps instead of us. But you would say, like, yeah, so we talk a lot about this and we have a lot of our own problems, but we are also, I started my talk with the statement that we are in the era of disruptions. We are in the era of, you know, a lot of challenges that we're facing, and one of them, and disruptions continued, out of all these issues that are there, we have COVID burst out, and then what we have, basically, well, we all went through this, and students, we had a lot of issues globally. We had issues with international students, with local students. Higher education institutions were not ready. Quality assurance was not ready to handle it. But it's not, it's part of the issue. COVID is not the problem. What if, and this is a bit delayed from what I'm saying. Yeah. What if we can no longer have access to the internet? Just think about, and either it is too fast or it is too slow, sorry. Yeah. What if we can no longer have access to the internet, or if we do not have the basics, electricity? Just imagine, how do we, well, sustainable development goals, sustainable education, we all talk about this. How do we make sure? So actually, COVID was not the problem. COVID was not the problem. What was the problem is that COVID actually helped us understand the problems we have in this system. So it helped us surface whatever we're all suffering from, that we're not there when it comes to individual needs of the students, individual needs of the faculty. So we are not there ready to face the challenges for sustainable education, and sustainable education is our major problem. So it's not the COVID, it's not the calamities, it's not anything else. It's lack of sustainable education and its quality assurance. This is what the problem is. And all of a sudden, everybody started talking about risk management, and risk management became one of the key issues in quality assurance. And in all the, circulars that we were sending, that all quality assurance bodies need to start concentrating on establishing and promoting risk management so that we are all ready to survive the calamities. This is something that we need to think, because we are in the era of disruption. So this is not going to end. And with the ICT revolution, this is what we are going to have. Well, I have been talking a lot about negative things so far. Well, and basically, it's all lemons. It's all not good. And if life gives us lots of lemons, we have no other way but make lemonade out of it, right? So let's see how we make a lemonade out of it. Yeah. And solutions are on the way. It's not all that bad. And I'm happy that we as higher education community, we are currently discussing widely and deeply all of these issues, and we're coming up with the solutions. One of the solutions that is on the way is a reference, UNESCO Higher Education Conference, which actually was a breakthrough in this, issues that were there. And you would see I'm providing here the resources where you will find the documents related, the research related to all the 10 themes that I showed you earlier, and then you will see the policy recommendations and the roadmap 2030. But most importantly, INCWAHI also did its job as quality assurance. INCWAHI also submitted in response to the 2030 roadmap for higher education, we already submitted our new international standards and guidelines, which are actually coming to replace INCWAHI guidelines of good practice, and I'll talk a little bit more about it shortly. But basically, these standards are already putting, like the core of the standards is diversification of the system. Now we're not having one standard fit all, because we're all diverse and we need to respect this diversity, embrace the diversity. So these standards are actually doing that. And then we're also coming up with special modules for cross-border education, which is core and blooming there. We're coming up with quality standards for micro-credentials, short learning programs, for online education. So all of this is already on its way, and it's already published with UNESCO. We're getting more shortly. Well, I talked about the international, the international quality hallmarks, which is the standards, INCWAHI standards and guidelines, and it's 2022 edition. And basically, it is underpinned by the INCWAHI values, which you would see evolving around diversity, inclusiveness, independence, academic freedom, integrity, and collaboration. So these are the values that are underpinning those standards. Briefly about the standards again, you would see the move. Oops. I'm sorry. A bit confused here to manage I'm managing two slides, two sets of slides. Oops. My apologies for this. Yeah, standards, and you would see here the diverse approach that we're proposing. The baseline standards, the standards for cross-border education, short learning programs, online provisions, and most importantly, the values that are basically underpinning it. I will share this presentation with you, so there is some guidance we come for for higher education systems and quality assurance providers, but the bottom line here, and it's in the bottom actually here, well, data, data, and data. This is something that we're all suffering from, all of the systems globally. Data is something that makes things work, makes us understand where we are and how we should be proceeding. And when you look at the capacity of the systems to collect and to analyze the data, this is one of the issues. And again, there is some, I'm not going to delve deeper into this, and you can read this later on. We already talked about this a lot. But briefly about the flexible learning pathways, I'm not stealing the spotlight from Jamil. He is talking more about this, but basically linked to the quality and relevance of programs, what the whole idea is that when you come up with the flexible learning pathways, there should be respective mechanisms to support it. And while flexible learning pathways, they are designed in a way that allow the student to exit and enter the higher education system at any point with the credentials that they have achieved at that point, which is a major achievement, then there are a lot of changes that need to be done, the mechanisms that need to be adjusted to make this work. And those are the policies on national qualifications framework, credit transfer system, recognition, lifelong learning policies. Bespoke policy on flexible learning pathways needs to be developed by the countries. So there is a whole suite of policies that needs to be developed, defined, identified, and put into practice, which is more important to make this work. I heard a lot of systems talking about the micro-credentials, about flexible learning pathways, but it stops there when it comes to implementation because there is no supporting mechanism for that. These are the recommendations that come from the study that we did for World Higher Education Conference. Basically, embrace diversification. There is nothing wrong with the diversification. We should embrace it, and then we will win definitely there. Innovate curricula. This is something that the higher education institutions cannot skip. Reimagine the profile and role of the faculty. Why the faculty is now leaving academia because we feel we're not valued enough. So we have to reimagine the role to make it work for all. Agile governance is the key. And then coherent and sustainable system, of course. Meaningful engagement with the stakeholders is something that is the key. And I would like to talk a bit more about that. Just a slide and no more than I'm closing this. But stakeholder engagement is paramount. And as you see globally, like 7 regions that the globe is divided into, like Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia Pacific region, Arab states, North America, Latin America, and Caribbean. So all of those, Africa, all those regions, when you consider it's only Europe that is good at stakeholder engagement. And let's look at what is going on here. And it's also based on our study. Basically, these are the columns are the stakeholders, and the colors are the regions in the globe. And you would see that when it comes to stakeholder engagement, more or less it's Europe that is coming up with this balanced approach with stakeholder engagement, and the other regions are still suffering there. Why is it important? That this is the relevance part of it. You cannot be relevant if you don't engage them. But the engagement needs to be meaningful. I saw myself how the engagement of students, for example, ruins the systems in post-Soviet countries because they're not ready to do that. You have to prepare them. There should be a preparation to have the engagement meaningful. Otherwise, those students will become like into the manipulation. They will be manipulated by the other board members and other representatives that are there. So meaningful engagement is only possible. It's critical, and it's only possible when you prepare them to engage in the practices. And there are so many ways, and you have to define in which way you are going to work with each type of stakeholder. In Europe, for me, I like to talk about this, to see how the students have become empowered. Now the students are really leaders in European higher education area. And I don't know where to show this, and so that it, yeah. So the preparation is in Europe, you would see the students are becoming really leaders. I'm really happy to see how the students are actually now driving the quality assurance. They're driving the higher education system. More or less, strongly they are engaged than in other regions. But again, this is really critical because you are developing, as a side effect, in Europe, you would see those students becoming leaders in education. So this is something that is coming as side effect for this engagement. Basically my message here, let's make the core values the core of your actions. We need to make it core, again, it's too fast. Anyway, make the core values the core of your actions. This is what we have to do. And for that, there are multiple mechanisms that you have to develop and put them into practice. Most importantly, put them into practice. And these developments need to be done with the stakeholders, because without their meaningful engagement, it's not going to work, truly. So, I have been making reference a lot to INCWAHI, and I just briefly want to introduce what organization I'm talking about. INCWAHI is the global umbrella framework, network for all quality assurance providers and accreditors. And that was the it was the first quality assurance network to appear globally in 1991, and you would see that after INCWAHI, regional networks started to appear. And INCWAHI was the first organization that in 2003, they came up with the first ever international quality hallmarks. Before ever European standards and guidelines or any other standards coming from the quality assurance network, INCWAHI had its international quality hallmarks. At that time, there was a problem. They didn't want to call them standards because they were new, and that was reasonable. So they moved from quality for hallmarks into the guidelines. And until recently, we had guidelines of good practice, which now in 2022, we changed into the international standards and guidelines. INCWAHI is actually moving globally. This is a global organization, and it belongs to the global community of quality assurance providers. And you would see that we have traveled globally already with our annual events, almost twice or 3 times. And in some regions, we are still exploring to be for the first time. And well, basically in 2003, in 2000, we were in Mexico in 2022, and we were proudly hosted by FIMPES. So thank you, FIMPES, very much. That was really a very a memorable event, first ever global gathering after pandemic. So they did a great job. And in 2023, we will be hosted by Independent Quality Assurance Agency of Kazakhstan in Astana. You are all welcome to join us. And with this, Ariana also made a reference to the book. This is the book that was published, the first global study. Why I decided to put it again here. That was the first global study ever, which covered both internal and external quality assurance practices globally. Before this book, this study was done only in some regions or covering either internal or external aspect. We are launching the second phase of the global study. And you are all university representatives and quality assurance and university association representatives. It's through you that we will be able to understand how to improve the internal quality assurance and external quality assurance practices. We will be turning to you through Ariana and through other representatives here with this study and support. I would request you to actively contribute to the data collection when it comes to identifying the practices on how we can better help higher education community and quality assurance to better contribute to societal needs and the core values of, promote core values of education. With this, I would like to thank you very much, and I'm happy to respond to questions that you might have.